well, reinventing the self. So when you first come into Raj Yoga, taking it as a serious spiritual practice, I think that that's the first time you reinvent yourself. And as you continue on the path of Raj Yoga, at whatever level you decide to continue, with whatever intensity, frequency, and so on that you set for yourself, every so often reinventing the self, I think, becomes quite relevant, because what happens is stagnation. And so reinventing the self, I want to talk about in the context of stagnation. And I don't know if you have, much to do with stagnant water, but this is a time where, when there's stagnant water, especially as it gets into the summer and it gets warm, stagnant water produces mosquitoes, and mosquitoes produce mosquito bites, and which you don't like. And some of them are quite poisonous. And some of them even can create illnesses like malaria and dengue fever. But stagnation is connected with an accumulation of waste or negativity, frustration, feeling bored, feeling pointless, feeling everything is same old, what's the point? Maybe you lose your sense of purpose, direction, and you tend to get somewhat fed up. So reinventing the self is something like bringing absolutely fresh water into your stream of consciousness, which washes away all those aspects of stagnation. And I think that, first of all, when you discover Raj Yoga and the concepts that are there, it is, for some people, a slow process. For other people, an astounding discovery of a sense of self that you just hadn't seen or anticipated. I think for many people, when you come to Raj Yoga, it is the result of searching for meaning, searching for understanding who am I, what's going on, what is my purpose. These kinds of questions come into one's mind. And it can also happen in the context of changes in life. Like, for example, in life, you have particularly strong changes that happen every so often. From your early childhood, all of a sudden, they send you to school, and that's a whole different thing. And then you get used to that, everything is fine, and all of a sudden they send you to a different school because you grow and your age is such that you're no longer in the lower school, you go to the middle school, and then lo and behold, a few years later, again change, again you go to a higher school, different people, different expectations, and you are at a different phase of life. So anyway, the reinvention of the self is imposed on you from external circumstances. And then you may go to college, university, different type of training, preparing you for entering the work world. And you may get into significant relationship for shifting from being with your parents to starting your own family and getting married. And this is again reinventing yourself. You may enter a career, which is another reinvention of the self. and then you have your children, and the children grow up, and then they go, and you again reinvent yourself. So reinventing the self is very much part of the course of life. And yet, the times when we reinvent ourselves are not necessarily connected with these preconditions and circumstances that are the same for the average people who go through life in a predictable way, because there are many unpredictable things that happen. One of the things that happen is illness or accident. And sometimes you get better very quickly. Sometimes you have an illness or an accident which creates such a situation, you have to really redesign your life and deal with a long-term health issue. And that's, again, a matter of reinventing the self. I think that Raj Yoga is all about a person arriving at the spiritual part of their life. When your spiritual part wakes up, which sooner or later it does, generally speaking, you may or may not have a religious background, but a religious background doesn't necessarily prepare you for spiritual awakening. And there's quite a big difference between practicing a religion and really getting into the spiritual part of yourself, which is an internal journey, and it's an inner discovery. And there you are discovering the non-material aspect of life, which we can call the spiritual aspect. Most people, as they reach a certain age, find they have to deal with psychological issues. And psychological issues are connected with different types of trauma, big trauma, little trauma, whatever. But many people have experienced childhood trauma, and it may not show up as something for you to deal with until much later in life. And it may well coincide with your spiritual awakening, you can say. Because when you start to develop yourself spiritually, you become very aware of psychological aspects, character aspects, the effects of trauma from the past, early trauma, middle-level trauma, current trauma. There are many things that can go under the label of trauma because they shock you, they diminish you, they force you to really look at what's going on and how you are handling your circumstances. And there, the message is, okay, now it's time to reinvent yourself, because what you have thought about yourself up until now is fine, but a time comes when it's out of date, it's no longer relevant, it doesn't satisfy you, and you start really thinking about the deeper aspect of your life. And so you come to be on a quest. You may start reading spiritual literature. You may meet someone who awakens that part of you by talking to you about spiritual things. Sometimes this is connected with death. That means not your own because you're still here, but people around you, your parents, accidents. And then you start thinking, okay, now what is this? And what is my relationship with life, death, the afterlife? Is there such a thing? Then you start looking at your belief systems. What do you believe in? Why? What is life all about? What is your life all about? Does it satisfy you? Is it meaningful? So as and when these type of questions come up, you are forced, there's kind of internal pressure to really rethink everything. Some people might say, oh, you're not so fun anymore, you're melancholy, you're going off on your own, and they will complain about it. But actually, every so often, you just need that kind of quiet, personal time to evaluate your life and really think about, is this how you want to live? Or do you want to add fullness to it by bringing in the spiritual dimension? As you continue with your life, every so often, whether you're engaged in an overtly spiritual life or whether you're just going along in a regular life with a little bit of spirituality that you include in it, again, every so often, everything becomes, okay, same old, been there, done that, got all the t-shirts, what is next? Is there anything beyond this? And this may come especially when you encounter major internal or spiritual challenges. And these challenges may not be very pleasant or comfortable, but they are great doors that open up in front of you and present a whole new landscape for which you are not prepared. And then it is time for you to say, ooh, what's going on here? It may make you a little confused, a little unsettled, but it is really a call beckoning you and saying, okay, now you have understood the lessons of life up until this point, which have all been good and relevant and maybe not necessarily pleasant, but nevertheless good and relevant. And then you say, okay, now I'm ready to grow. And that is a matter of your personal maturity, your depth, and you're shifting into another phase of life. It doesn't matter whether you're on a spiritual path or not, but this comes up every so often. And I think that it is connected with this feeling of stagnation. So sometimes the feeling of stagnation is the challenge. Sometimes there's some big challenge where all of a sudden everything that was going along nice and smooth, everything was according to expectations, and then suddenly it's not. Everything collapses around you. You may be catapulted into a different location with different people, and you have to reinvent yourself. It's true that oneself is very much connected with the context of other people, places, your activities, what people expect of you, what they project onto you, what you expect of yourself. And when things change, you have to renegotiate your relationship with a new environment. A new internal environment, a new social environment, professional environment, health environment, and maybe even intellectual and emotional. All of these things are very much there and part of your personal reinvention of yourself. So let's look at how do you go about reinventing yourself? I mean, I don't know if there's any fixed recipes for it, but there are a few elements which are, I think, common. There's aging and maturing. It doesn't necessarily happen like a smooth road, but there can be like sudden jolts. And when you get a sudden jolt and you sort of no longer like a little child. And the things that are especially helpful in this personal growth is the challenges of life. So I think the first thing to look at is what your current challenges. Because your current challenges, internal and external, contain little signposts about what you can do to reinvent yourself. One challenge can be the end of a relationship, the end of a job, the end of a geographical location. And so it means that everything about you that was connected with the people in that location, in that relationship, in that job are gone. Now, yet there may be some who you keep contact with. And these long-term relationships that last you your whole life, they're very important, and they give wealth and richness in your life. The richness of a long-term relationship is invaluable, because we do not live our lives alone. Even though somebody who enters into spiritual practice very seriously does bring a lot of solitude into their lives, but at the same time, there are long-term significant relationships with others who have similar interests or a similar life path. And this companionship along this journey of life is very, very valuable and important. Always reflecting you back to yourself in a context of personal development and advancement along the way. But on the other hand, lots of people, places, things, circumstances, routines are gone. It happens also when a person retires from their work life, and the family is gone on their journey of their own families, and all of a sudden you find yourself all alone with nothing to do and somewhat empty and without the income that you had. And so this produces challenge, and you have to respond to it. And so identify your challenge. And I think it's important to actually take pencil and paper and write down, okay, what's happening now? What changes are going on in your life externally? And then also write another column, you can say, about how you feel about them. Because when there is change, there's also stress. And you may think, oh, I don't have any stress, I'm just fine. But just the fact of change brings stress, and it may bring different stress from what you're used to dealing with. And you may not have the capacity to deal with this new kind of stress, which means this is something to develop. Because reinventing yourself is very connected with building capacity. I think people usually think building capacity has to do with your professional life, but I think not. I think that it definitely applies to your emotional life, your family life, your professional life, and your life as a person, just by yourself in the midst of the world, heading towards the later part of your life, when all the things that were of primary importance are no longer there. And you have to deal with yourself. And for many people who've been used to giving their time and energy to their family, their work, and so on, there's a certain emptiness that surrounds you when all of these people and responsibilities and so on are gone. And you may feel, what is my purpose? Or what am I here for? And you may look back on your life and say, did I live as I should have done if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, would I have lived this way? And I think probably yes. Everyone, of course, has some regrets and some things. Oh, I should have done this. I should have developed that. I should have traveled. I should have, so many things. But you have to come to terms with, okay, this is what I did, and you can't do everything. You did what you did, and you had all these different relationships. There was success and failure, happiness and sorrow, victory and defeat. All these pairs of opposites present themselves to you as you look back on your life and you say, okay, now, here I am now at a kind of crossroads. And so, one of the things you can write down for yourself is, what is this crossroads? What are the different directions that you could take? And see the possibilities. Do you want to do community service? Do you want to get involved in your grandchildren? Do you want to, suppose you have a health issue, do you want to get involved in helping other people who have similar health issues? There are many, many pathways that present themselves to you if you look around. And then you must sit down with yourself really deeply and say, okay, self, what do you want? And this is a very, very simple question, but a very big question. And I think it's quite difficult to answer because there are layers. If you look at what do you want in the most superficial way, you come up with superficial answers, short-term things that would be nice, but it's short-term, it's temporary, and so it doesn't satisfy you at depth. And then you go again to this question, what do I want? What is the most important thing for you in terms of being, doing, feeling, a sense of purpose? What do you really, really want? And it may take time for you to decide what you want. And you may take time to look at the different layers of answering that question. And they're connected with how you feel. Do you feel lonely? Do you want companionship? Do you feel bored? Do you want intellectual stimulation? Do you feel scared? Do you want some kind of consolation, some kind of reassurance? Are you thinking about imminent death? Because as time goes by, it comes closer. And so there are many people who want clarity about that, because if you haven't thought about it for your whole life and all of a sudden it's like the next thing that's probably going to happen, next big thing, are you prepared? Do you want to prepare for it? Do you want to deny its existence? All of these, they're metaphysical questions, they're psychological questions, emotional, social. And so you're really looking at yourself with a magnifying glass, with a microscope, with a telescope. You want to really see, okay, self, who are you anyway? And of course, the self has, again, many, many layers. One thing that happens when you begin to think about spirituality and you start looking at Raj Yoga, you start looking at the idea of the self as a spiritual being who is eternal, and this life as one of many lives. We came here from other lives, and after this life, there are others that are yet to come. And so you start looking at yourself in the context of a sequence of lives and ask yourself, okay, do I become a different person in these different lives? And you find that actually, no, you're the same person in your essence. And even if you look at all the various different stages of this life, you're the same person as you were when you were a small child, or the same person as you pass through your education. Obviously, you mature, you develop, you change, but in essence, you're the same person. And spiritual study and practice is all about zooming in to that essential self that you are. And when you're looking at reinventing the self, you're looking at relating to yourself on progressively deeper levels. And not only deeper, but also more authentic. I think in youth, one is quite concerned about image, and children always get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I used to say, I already am. I don't become someone when I grow up. I already am someone. So I don't want to be someone else. I already am. And sometimes I would tell people, okay, I want to be the weather. And they would say, you mean you want to be a meteorologist? I said, no, 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 no. I want to be the weather. Oh, they say, you're nuts. Nobody can be the weather. But I held on to that. Yeah, I want to be the weather. And what is the weather? It's such a strange thing to want to be. But I think it has to do with atmosphere. I mean, earlier, when Madhavi was talking to all of us, we were talking about the weather. It's cold, it's snowing, it's rainy, it's dull, it's bright, it's sunny, it's night in some part of the planet, morning in another part of the planet. We're very much influenced by the weather, the time of day. Is it light? Is it dark? What's going on around us in the atmosphere? And as time went by, this idea of being the weather stayed with me and is still with me because it's all to do with the atmosphere that radiates from the soul as you develop yourself spiritually more and more through life. And actually, there are some people, they start their spiritual practice quite young and it becomes the way for them. And so you have all these other regular aspects of life at the same time. But for some, the spiritual part is central and everything revolves around that. And what that means is that when you come to a time in life when you're retired or your relationships start turning into funerals and you become more and more just by yourself, this is what happens as you get older. And so then you're really going to make your spiritual component more and more important because the physical, temporary part of your life is less and less holding together. And the spiritual part of your life is becoming more and more substantial. At least that's definitely what I experience in my life because I had started these things in my early 20s. And I had a career in media at the same time. And even in a spiritual life, there are many attributes of spirituality connected with meaningful activities and doing things to make the world a better place on one level or another. And you look inside yourself, you find your essential talents and qualities, and you want to develop them and use them for a higher purpose. And so this gives dimension, substance, and meaning to your life as you carry on. And you pass through all sorts of landscapes, and you pass through good times, bad times, dark times, bright times, high times, low times. Everything is there. And I think a willingness to reinvent yourself as time goes by enables you to, in some ways, you can have many lives in one life. And you realize that your professional designation, that's not your identity at all. And sometimes people say to me, oh, you have to be a speaker, so you have to give us your biodata and send us your photograph. And I say, well, my biodata. I'm not going to send you my biodata because that's nothing to do with me. My education, I did this, I did that, I did the other. That's not what I am. There's a few things I did, but nothing to do with my identity. And if I am to meet with people, talk with people, present to people things that are of importance, it really doesn't have much to do with my so-called biodata. So I avoid it. And this is because as you start to look at yourself spiritually, you find that there is a really big difference between who you are and what you do. But in the materialistic world, who you are is what you do. And spiritual discovery says, wait a minute, it's not. It's nothing to do with it. And you hear this. I used to do a lot of interviews with people, and sometimes people would say, oh, I'm just a housewife. And I would say, excuse me, why you use the word just for that? The work that you do, taking care of a place, taking care of the family for no financial remuneration does not devalue you. We live in a world where people's value is determined by their financial remuneration and all the stuff they have, but that is fake. It is deceptive. It doesn't prove or disprove anything about you. But the narrative that we grow up with, that we are surrounded by, is your value is determined by what stuff you have, how much is in your bank, and what people say about you on a scale of material material achievements. And that is all, you can say, lies. A criminal can have just as much money as somebody who's worked hard. Probably they get more, you know. And so these things, all of a sudden, when you're thinking of reinventing yourself, you start looking at this, am I what I do? No, I'm not what I do. I am me. But then the question is, what's that? Who's that? It's very deep. And you can't just go from shallow to deep in one step. No, it takes time, it takes investigation, and we have to go through the layers one at a time and take as long as we want to, as long as we need to with each layer. And this is why life is long. If you have a long life, not everybody has a long life, but as long as possible, it gives you the opportunity to look at all these layers patiently with enough time to consider them, to understand meanings behind the hidden experiences, or the visible experiences contain hidden meaning behind them. And something that appears to be good superficially ends up being not that great at all. and something that appears to be not very good ends up being listed as some of the most important moments of your life. And so these are all very meaningful, significant. I remember one time I was walking in the Canadian Rocky Mountains with a friend who was a mountaineer. And after a few years of mountaineering, he eventually was diagnosed with cancer. And so that was a big moment of reinventing the self and changing the life. And he said to me, look, you see that pine tree over there? And he pointed at quite a large pine tree. And he said, getting up to the top of that was like what I had to do to get to the top of Mount Everest. He was an Everest summiteer. And he said, yeah, it was difficult. I had to train for many years. I had to make several attempts, but I made it. But now I'm doing something altogether much, much bigger. See that mountain summit over there? Getting through cancer is like getting up there. And because it involved not just the physical body, not just the humility that you need to get to the top of the mountain, but really dealing with the essence of pain, of life and death and meaning and so on. And he said, getting diagnosed with cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me because it enabled me to really understand the value and meaning of life, which I didn't get from all the work I did to get to the top of my sport, which was mountaineering. And I kept this story with me because I think it has a lot of meaning connected with the circumstances, the apparently really negative circumstances that we encounter along the way, which really force us to give up a lot of illusions and delusions and really get to the essence of meaning of life and really look at the self and deal with the real stuff. It's like a journey of getting closer and closer to what's real and letting go of the fake, the illusions, the delusions, the superficial stuff. Slowly, slowly, you just divest yourself of these things that present themselves as very meaningful, but end up showing themselves to be actually quite superficial and not so important. It means that something we thought was really a big deal actually isn't. Something that we thought was really terrible is actually not that bad. Something we thought was really essential, important, good, I have to have it, actually you don't. Every time you realize things like this is a little moment of rethinking what's life about, what's important, why are you doing what you're doing, why are you spending time with who you're spending time with, and you arrive ultimately at yourself. I mean, I remember a very interesting moment when I realized, you know what, self, the best of all is that I am me. I wouldn't want it any other way. I wouldn't want to be anyone else. With all the ups and downs and ins and outs of life, the most important and valuable thing is that I am me. And there you get a really deep satisfaction. You really move away from these comparisons and think, oh, I should be like this one, or I should have what this one has, or I don't like what I am. I should be different. I should be bigger, smaller, thinner, fatter, cleverer, richer, whatever it is. It's like you become dissatisfied with yourself and you become negative towards yourself. But in spirituality, you're really going to the essence. And you do pass through all the various character defects and so on, so on, so on. But what you arrive at is the essential self, which is clean, pure, beautiful, magnificent. And as you arrive there, you say, thank God that I am me. And then you become satisfied. You become happy with who you are and not much concerned about whether you are appreciated or not appreciated. That's neither here nor there. Do people love you, not love you? Well, they probably do. They may or may not show it. Do people hate you? Well, some probably do, but it doesn't matter anyway because I'm okay. If they don't like me, that's not my problem, really. You realize you don't have to please everybody, can't please everybody anyway. And you don't have to prove anything. You don't really have to do anything. And you become more and more connected with just being. And that your being is going back to being the weather, your being is producing an atmosphere. And the atmosphere is coming from the quality of your soul, your love, your peace, your purity, your brightness. All of this is going out into the atmosphere, and you are the weather. So I think I probably got close to achieving my wish that when I grow up, I want to be the weather. And that means to be satisfied to just create atmosphere and put that atmosphere out into the world, radiate. That's who I am. I'm a radiance, like a star, like the sun. These are all symbols of what we are, the spiritual being. Om Shanti. So take a moment to become calm, let go of tensions, concerns, temporary things, and begin to go inside to touch the essential self, the real me who is forever. And know that I am the pure, powerful, peaceful, loving, and blissful being of light. Let me persist in this state for a little while. Come back into action through the body, and then return to the internalized state of the soul in soul conscious remembrance of the Supreme One. Be still, be easy, be comfortable. Good night. Sure.